Thank you guys for joining our session. We wanted to close out the year with a special session with our Azure and M365 experts led by you guys. Let me kick it off by introducing you to our esteemed panel. We have Afif Achmad from Professional Services Engagement Manager. We have Will Whaley, our Cloud Support Manager. And then we have Andy Nolan, our Azure Architect. I'm going to give them a quick chance to properly introduce themselves because they have so much experience and they're such great people. So yeah, let's kick it off with you guys.
All right. Woo! Good morning. Thank you to everybody tuning in. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We have a lot of good content for you guys today. And all the returners, thank you for tuning back again. This is the last show of the year, so we hopefully have a lot of good content and a lot of good questions for you guys to answer. Without further ado, my name is Afif Achmad. I'm the Professional Services Engagement / Delivery Manager, overseeing all of your project and services delivery here at Trusted Tech Team, overseeing the project management team, the cloud architects and cloud engineers, and just ensuring that we have the best white glove service delivery for you. I've been in IT for about 10 years now. I started my career in K-12 education, worked in the finance field, and got my foot here at Trusted Tech Team. Been here for about 2 years now. It's been a happy marriage. And yeah, very happy to be here today. I would identify myself as a modern work expert, so very happy to answer any of those M365 modern work questions today. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Will Whaley. I'm the Cloud Support Manager here at Trusted Tech Team. I've been with the firm nearly 3 years now. Time flies. And in my entire career, I've been in the SaaS space across application support, cloud support, business analysis, and production systems. My team supports all of your cloud applications in M365. So that's going to be M365, Azure, Power Platform, Dynamics, and even a little bit of Copilot. So if you are a customer of Trusted Tech Team and you have cloud licenses with us, if you ever contact our support team, you will be working with one of my brilliant engineers. Happy to be with you today.
Wonderful. I'm Andy Nolan, Azure Architect, work very closely with these two gentlemen. And if any of you customers out there have Azure with us and you've consulted at some point over in the last couple of years that I've been here at Trusted Tech Team, you've probably spoken to me at one point or another. Been in the industry working for MSPs and CSPs for probably over a decade now, and have a pretty good in-depth knowledge base with Azure, Azure Virtual Desktop, automations in Azure. So if any of my favorite weirdos out there have questions about Graph API or stuff like that, like the more esoteric like stuff like Azure API management, please ask. But Azure stuff, I got you. So very excited to kick this off here.
Awesome, great experience. So let's put it into use. I see there's a lot of people from all over Canada, New York, Arizona. That's really cool. We have a pre-submitted question from the UK, actually. So this question is, what is the best option to store older data in SharePoint, which have not been used for several years?
It's a good one. I would say, and it's called collaborative here. If the data is archived, you're not really using it, you don't want to utilize your SharePoint storage capacity, I'd recommend moving that into an Azure blob, and you could cold storage that stuff. What do you guys think?
Yeah, if you're not accessing it very often, you might as well put it in the cheapest hosting option available, especially if it's a large amount of data. SharePoint eventually is not great for storing huge amounts of data. So your blob storage on your archive tier or your cold tier, just depending on how much you access it, can really optimize the pricing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think keeping a good feel for, because remember, like the colder you go storage-wise, the more expensive it is to rehydrate it if you need it.
That's true.
But usually, like a good rule of thumb is like whatever, if you just, because everybody's planning this stuff out, take whatever the storage requirements are, price it out at the cold tier, and then also just look at the cost to rehydrate as well. And if you just, even if you never spend it, just plan to restore, let's say, that entire data set once a year and use that maybe as your benchmark. And that way, you know that like, you're not going to get any unexpected surprises.
Nice, yeah.
Awesome. Another question that we have is about the Windows Server 2025 hot patch. And basically it's just, what is it? And I know that's something that a lot of people are super interested in, and we have a graphic ready up on screen. So yeah, can you guys please explain that?
Yeah, I mean, for all of the viewers tuning in, I'm pretty sure we've already tuned in to Microsoft Ignite 2024, which is pretty awesome. I mean, a lot of Copilot news that was released, but I think one of the more underrated subjects that was released was Windows Server 2025. And one of the more attractive things about it is hot patching. Yeah, you're hearing that right, hot patching. So the concept of hot swapping drives on servers.
Yeah.
Now you can hot patch your Windows Server operating system, which is pretty awesome. But if you go ahead and look at that image that we have on the screen, check that out. All of these little security and feature updates that were applied on the server, and you have that little message right there. They were all applied without restarting your server. I mean, think about all those disaster stories where, you know, you'd have, as a systems administrator or even as an endpoint engineer, like when you're doing these little patches and stuff, sometimes things go down. But apparently they're supporting it up to Windows Server 2012.
Yeah,
which is wild. So
really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of upgrading your operating system with also patching with all the latest features and security updates, I want to give that a try.
It's well, if anybody was on the last webinar when me and Andrew Hill were discussing like different like Azure topics, patching came up. It grinds my gears. Like I was a big, I don't like patching, and I think it's the huge benefit of this is like it's going to be, it's felt at any level. So if you have one server or 10, it's valuable, but you really start to see the gains when you scale out. You know, if you're managing a fleet of a couple of hundred.
Oh yeah.
Not even especially multi-region, like globally, like trying to manage like downtime windows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now is important. There are some patches, and on occasion you like
probably past it.
Yeah. So like even with hot patch, it's like I think it's around about like maybe once a quarter or so. There's a certain like, you know, like super giga cumulative update that has to occur. But even then, pushing your patch windows out from once a month to every 3 months, or maybe even beyond if there's nothing super critical.
Your routine and your security patches.
Exactly.
Yeah. Please, no more waking up in the middle of the night. They try to
Those horror stories.
6 in the morning.
Yeah. No, yeah, like fire drills for 0 days, or remotes, you know, code execution exploits, stuff like that. Big fan.
Yeah.
Good question. Or well, not good. It's a good question, but also it's a big topic.
It's a huge topic.
I hope somebody has some questions about hot patch. Like,
Yeah.
I love it.
Awesome
There's a follow-up question
You did.
actually.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what do we got?
Is there a CrowdStrike version?
Oh, is that
If only.
if only, right?
Yeah.
It's like a meme right there.
Yeah. Gosh, I love it. It actually, that is a good point though, like or a good little like topic of discussion too, because like automating hot patch, like there is the legitimate potential that something could go wrong, and so
Potentially,
you know, it's something to just kind of keep an eye on. Like Microsoft, they invest a lot of money in these sorts of things, of course, but it is always healthy to have a certain level of like skepticism with these things. Like as much as I hate patching and the act of doing it and the time investment, on the other hand, moving to the extreme of just allowing hot patch to just auto occur without any sort of reporting or like
quality assurance.
Yeah,
Monitoring.
Exactly, the monitor, and that's actually monitoring is really the key part there, because if you don't know what's happening, and
that's not good.
And so yeah, if something could happen that you know, pushes a driver update or something, you know, or changes something on the kernel side that makes things go haywire.
But yeah, potentially.
Always good to keep an eye on what's happening.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of competitors would even, you know, compete with this concept. I think this is I mean, there's always been updates where you don't require to do, you know, restarts and whatever like that, but putting it out there that they're doing hot patching, I think they might be up to something in regards to pioneering that new concept of new tech, right?
And it's very like enterprisey, because there's certain like like Linux, like distros and stuff. There's certain things, but it's like admittedly, I'm not super familiar on that side of the house. But I do think like like this is a really good step in like moving forwards for Microsoft with like the automation side of things. Not basically just not being so tethered to this. Like, oh, you got to do a big install, a big read.
Right.
A good example of that evolution, I think, is from like OS upgrades. If anybody remembers, imagine going from like 2008 to 2012 R2 or 2012 to 2012 R2. Like every iteration, it's been getting better and better. Like there's a ton of work that's gone on the back end, the like Minwin kernel thingy that they have in the background for like being able to bootstrap these things. The old days, this was like you just it was a whole process, and you hope that it worked. Like people wouldn't ever do in-place upgrades, or rarely, because it was so questionable.
It has to be planned. It has to be thought out. You'd even have to, potentially communicate with the whole organization that there's might be a down period.
Right? Downtime, you'd bring
exactly
parties, maybe consultants, and you're really not doing any of that. It is a lot easier to be a sysadmin. With tools like this.
Truly, completely agree.
The next question comes from Thomas, so thank you for submitting. So he asks, do you think using a VM in Azure as the replication partner for an on-site Hyper-V server? Oh, I think he's asking if it's possible, but also a good idea.
It is never a bad idea to have availability cross-site, but it's going to be bandwidth constrained. A lot of it, unfortunately, a lot of it is like it depends, because it's like if you have the appropriate amount of bandwidth, if you have something that is you're not experiencing a lot of like disk churn day to day on that, or hour to hour on that like VM or that cluster, or whatever the scale of object that you're looking at. I think that's it's definitely possible, and we've done it in the past, but on smaller scales. So a lot of it, unfortunately, is sort of like with a little asterisk of it. It depends. There's a lot of like to the fact that you're having availability and wanting availability like to another site is really key, I think. But a lot of it is going to just be contingent on what your infrastructure is, bandwidth, speed wise, and all that jazz. That's
Somebody asks, Ronnie asks, what would be the best Azure cloud technology to migrate a medium-sized business currently using on-premise file server / domain controller environment?
Foundational file server, SharePoint. I think that'd be the number one. I think SharePoint kind of solves a lot of those problems that you'll experience on a file server. You can replicate pretty much everything that you do on an Active Directory GPO level, even within Intune and SharePoint, right? You can create those device configuration profiles that will go ahead and scope to specific dynamic user groups. And even on the SharePoint level, there's granular permission, and it's even better in a file server, right? Because with a file server, you won't really have external collaboration or do B2B collaboration to that instance. But with SharePoint, I could add external domains for B2B external collaboration and, get more granular permission sets per file, per folder, whatever the case may be.
That's true, yeah, because DLP on-prem is possible, but it's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more,
a lot more configuration.
Exactly, and then covering all those file types. Now there are some caveats as well in terms of like depending on what is on that file server, because
what kind of files?
Exactly, like your business docs all day, every day. Let's go to SharePoint, right? Like if you're like a engineering firm, you have CAD docs or CAD docs. Yes. So it's a lot of context, but ultimately, though, again, sort of like calling back to the last webinar I was on, like like lifting and shifting a file server into Azure is not the optimal way to do this.
Oh, it's not. Not all the time.
Right.
Not every solution is going to be cookie cutter, right? I would say it depends. Maybe even start a consultation with us. let's see what we could do for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of solutions out there beyond just SharePoint. You've got Azure Files and you've got other price optimizations depending on how big this data is, how frequently it needs to be accessed, how much you need to share with internal and external stakeholders, and ultimately what kind of data it is.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
unless there's a huge deployment, pretty sure that like whatever you would deploy in Azure and then SharePoint, and the cost if you were to consult and have like like someone like us perform the work
Yeah.
is probably going to come under whatever hardware refresh you would
Oh, for
spend
sure.
on-prem.
Yeah.
Especially when
Continual
you
hardware
the
refresh.
continual, yeah.
I mean, every 5 years or so.
And licensing with software assurance as well.
True.
Like that,
True.
it racks up, and that's really the appeal on the Azure side of things. So I guess specifically to answer your question, SharePoint is a huge point of interest there.
Mhm.
Maybe Azure files, depending on the context of the files, like limited, and then for your users, Azure Virtual Desktop. There's
Yeah.
like directory services into
Yeah.
like that. You can replace your entire stack very easily.
Yeah. Options are limitless.
Yep.
I love that. Options are limitless. Okay, we have another question from the UK. I know this one may require some additional information, but maybe you can consult a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a small number of users that have 2 different accounts to enable them to fill 2 different job functions. At the moment,
Okay.
we license both accounts, even though it's the same person the account belongs to. Is there a better way of doing this? And maybe if you need more information, you can point them in the right direction, because I know this is an existing customer.
So you got 2 accounts, you're using 2 licenses to perform different functions. I mean, if the case is you have 2 different users, right, and they both have a different UPN, right, or a different email address, I would consider consolidating it under one user, adding an alias, or even leveraging a shared mailbox to email out of that, right? I'm just kind of going into the depths of why you would kind of extend that. But that's kind of how I see it. How about you guys?
It might depend on your use case, as in why is this person doing 2 different job functions? Like, do they have different permissions in those 2 different users? Are they an admin on one side and
Right.
a regular user
Yeah.
for another department?
That makes sense.
And it might be something that you could consolidate if you took a closer look at those permissions. I've seen people do 2 accounts before. It's usually in that kind of admin user split, and they usually
Yeah.
license the user. But it's not unheard of. Maybe people will want to put a little bit more security on those admin accounts.
Sure.
But if you are doubling up the licensing, you are going to be doubling up the costs. So considering consolidating those, maybe you do kind of a bare bones licensing scheme with one user, and you do the full
True.
suite of tools and licenses that they need for the other user. Could be possible, but it really depends on the use case and why that particular user needs 2 accounts.
That's a
Yeah.
good point. Like with the double licensing, yeah, it's like depending on what the need is, yeah, you could like if you have like a Microsoft E3 license, let's say on
Yeah.
everyone, maybe if you really only need email only access, you could like get
Give them an exchange mailbox. Yes, that's it.
Okay, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Variety. I would love to if you could give us the use case as a follow-up, just to like if they're yeah, that I would love to know.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of maybe be able to provide a little bit more insight.
Yeah, or if you want a more personal, intimate
Yeah.
type of session, consultation. We'll
Yeah.
review your licensing.
We just dropped that link in the chat. So thank you for mentioning that, Afif. If you guys need any help, please use that. But we'll be reaching out to this specific customer as well, just to get a little bit more information and consult a little bit more. All right, another question from Julio. Is Microsoft Defender good enough? That's a funny way to put it. Is Microsoft Defender good enough for email spam, endpoint protection? Why
Oh,
select a third party?
No, yeah, I choose Defender all the way. I know some might say otherwise, but the fact that you're on one platform, I'm all about consolidation. I think the most common thing that you see now in 2024 or even the previous years was like SaaS overload, SaaS saturation in the market, right? But truly, I do believe in Defender being that product that will cover, identity, that will cover cloud apps, that will that will cover endpoints, right? I think there's been a lot of development over the past years, if anyone kind of had controversial thoughts about it. But I mean, against its competitors, it has everything pretty much, right? You want anti-spam, anti-phish policies, it's got it. On a Defender for endpoint level, it has ASR now and EDR detection, right? Defender for cloud apps, it'll pretty much monitor your enterprise app activity. So that's something to consider, right? Do you want to go onto different platforms to kind of do the same thing, or do you would rather, centralize everything and consolidate everything? I think that's one of the more common instances that we'll have when we're consulting with our clients. With our clients, it's just, let's make it easier for you.
Yeah.
And not just to mention the wealth of applications that you could use, but the integrations between them and the configuration and the maintenance that has to be done to keep all of this data fresh and relevant. Honestly, when it comes to monitoring, you can very much over monitor and over protect. And at the point where you're just hearing noise from all of your systems.
Yeah.
You're ignoring alerts. You're kind of knowing that these are false positives. So you don't want to put in too much protection either. Now, Defender has come a long way. I know people, as you mentioned, probably had different opinions about Defender, maybe even a few years ago. But Microsoft has invested a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of development into increasing the Defender suite. There's so many Defender products out there now for every particular business and their use cases. You can just get into anything that you need for protection, but it's come a long way. So we would recommend that first-party solution of Microsoft Defender because it has everything right there for you.
And also as well, like to piggyback off of everything that you guys said, the integrations are key. Like I not too long ago, I worked with a customer with Defender for Cloud Apps, and it natively plugs into everything that they had deployed in Azure, up to and including their Azure SQL databases, and it picked up some sketchy logins to SQL, and it, because it's reviewing all of this stuff. And ultimately as well, Microsoft's security team development budget in general is like north of $1 billion, which is more than the revenue of most annually of most of the most security companies that have products out there. So Microsoft is a behemoth. It is a pretty friggin' hardcore enterprise grade product. So Defender is legit. It's good stuff.
Awesome. I do also want to mention that we know that not every business is the same, obviously, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all. So we do have partners if you guys do need some unique type of system going on, and we have expertise for that in all things, including security. But that was a great answer. Cool. Next question from Ian. What's your thoughts on the new Windows 365 Link device, and is Citrix still viable in 2025?
That came out of Ignite, right? Which I think is a really cool thing. And everyone kind of made a joke about it, how it looked like a little Mac Mini or an Apple TV. But, I think the use case of it is actually really good. I mean, everyone always wants to critique a product and it only does that. But for the fact that, the Windows 365 Link is made for Windows 365 cloud PCs, right? I think Microsoft is doing something strategic there, right? Because yes, you do have AVD as a solution, but what if I wanted to make that process a little bit easier? Maybe I don't have that many users to leverage AVD for. That's where Windows 365 PCs kind of cloud PCs kind of come into play. But your Windows 365 Link essentially is you connect it to the network. You can obviously connect your keyboard and monitor. But it's gonna straight up out of the bat, you're gonna sign in with your M365 identity, right? So your corporate identity, whatever the case may be. But per your IT administrator from the organization that you're working with, they'll already kind of pre-provision that device, and that device gets pre-provisioned within Intune, right? So whatever that preset of device configuration policies, applications, it's all right there. It's all gonna be loaded. So in that light version of it, I think it's pretty good.
I'm a huge fan, and I love AVD. AVD is my favorite thing. I think that thin clients in general have been, and if anybody's ever used them, especially at scale, they are a little janky, a little can be difficult to work with, like HP, like ThinOS, or there's a variety of. You're getting slightly strange underpowered or fairly underpowered devices that maybe have ARM CPUs in them that are really low spec with these Linux distros that are okay, but they're not great. And Microsoft they have a habit of swooping in on really really healthy markets for potential where things are like really the industry is underserved there.
Yeah.
And so the these link devices is or are like really good. Like
Yeah.
the well manicured like setup process with autopilot with none of that exists for other thin clients in the or not in the same way in the
True.
industry. And so especially as well, fixed cost for a device, fixed cost for a license, which now means you have a fixed cost per user that you deploy. Very good. Whereas AVD, you can get close, but like it's always variable.
Yeah, variable cost.
And so that is those two things together that lets you forecast on an asset side, right? And an overall like capex and opex with the license and the capex with the device, so you know what your hiring forecast is for 2025. Well, you know how much minimal licensing is going to get increased and how much expenditure you need on those devices. So I'm a big fan.
What do you think of this pivoting by Microsoft towards ease of use? Windows 365 link, so easy to set up. You've got a pre-provisioned environment right there. You can predict the cost.
Yep.
It's optimized for small and medium-sized businesses, because there's certainly some medium-sized businesses that would use it too, but it doesn't.
Even enterprise.
Even enterprise too. They might consider an AVD solution or something a little bit more robust or configurable, but still, this emphasis on, easy solutions, low code, no code solutions across the M365 space that we see, technologies that can be provisioned without an extremely robust, extremely developed IT team. I think it's an emphasis by Microsoft recently, and I think we saw that in a lot of the announcements at Ignite.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Efficiency.
It's you look at the last couple of things we talked about, that like with hot patch, and then we were discussing like how the upgrade paths have improved for Windows, right? Like it's the whole like design ethos is seemingly to make things easier, be more accessible, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and one thing I want to emphasize too, like your Windows 365 link, that's just the device itself, but the whole concept is like a virtual PC, right? I think I even saw a little clip of someone doing CAD, so it's able to do high GPU processing type of tasks. It all depends what type of license that you're signing in.
I'm a very skeptical person, so I'd want to try it out myself to be sure. But I saw that and I was like, oh, yeah, because you can on CAD, like for AVD with the GPU environment.
That's true.
It can be good. So I'm very excited. I think this is really good prospects for like SMB and beyond as well, but like really just making these things accessible to more people. Very exciting.
Awesome. Super thoughtful stuff. Thank you guys, by the way, for all the questions. We're getting a lot. And don't forget that if we don't get to it, somebody on the side is going to be responding to everything, and we'll also reach out if there's any questions that are unanswered. So continue to send them in. I love it. Awesome. Okay, next question, and I hope I don't butcher this name. From Beatley, I think. How do you delete version history of how do you delete version of history older than 1 year on SharePoint? Any policy on this? How to reduce amount version less than 100 as minimum account 100 according SharePoint configuration? Okay, so I think they're just asking about the versions of SharePoint, if you're able to, if there's a minimum limit or if you can delete that.
Okay, yeah, that does eat up space. I mean, that's all retention policy stuff, right? So taking a look at what's pre-configured, I think pre-configured is like by 5 years, or maybe a little bit less. But yeah, just taking a look at your retention policies, that's gonna help clear up space and optimize files when you launch them.
Your entire data lifecycle management strategy should be pre-planned. This isn't something that we would recommend you get serious about once you realize you're out of space. Certainly a lot of people are just going to kick the can down the road, buy more space. But SharePoint storage can really add up if you get past what's included in the licensing, and including, just from the fact that you have a tenant. So the fact that people will keep pushing that limit higher and higher and higher and just buying more storage, we don't recommend it. I understand for ease of use, it can be very nice, but honestly, having a realistic archive and deletion strategy as well, because Certainly this happens in the financial industry as well. When old records are retained to a certain point and can be retrieved, you basically have to continue servicing those requests. So you want to have an industry specific, it's going to be different in every industry, but an industry specific policy on how long you keep the records you keep, how long they can be requested, and when you delete them. I used to have an IT director who was adamant that we were going to delete things exactly when we were allowed to. So our policy was 3 years at the time, but at 3 years and 1 day, we deleted the data specifically so that we wouldn't have to pay to retain it, and also so that it couldn't be requested.
Data governance.
Yes.
Don't neglect that. That's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
You know, if you do a consultation with us, it doesn't matter how big, how small. I will find something, but I could definitely tell you, data governance is probably one of the more neglected pieces within the whole M365 or even just IT space in general. But yeah, that's pretty much the foundation of that.
And if you do go down the route of changing the retention policy to blow everything away older than a year or whatever time period, just be careful when you're making wholesale changes, because you know, maybe like regular sort of like day-to-day business talks won't be a big deal, but depending on how many people you have in SharePoint, what kind of segmentation you have, like if everybody's in one site, you know, if you have legal people there where they kind of do have a propensity to like the history of their documents since the beginning of time. Like or you know, if you have a template, or if you manage like your master services agreement and it just lives in SharePoint, and you have like a bunch of versions going back to the date of inception, just be mindful before you make a wholesale change, because Microsoft can be fairly like helpful and lenient, but really like the expectation is like once those things are gone, they are gone.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very hard to recover. If it's possible.
That's true.
In many cases, it is not.
You can open a ticket and you fall into the same rabbit hole.
But maybe not, right? Like you just expect it to be gone.
Yeah.
Good tip. I really like this next question from Anne. How would you go about systematically optimizing costs in the cloud beyond just low-hanging fruit like resizing VMs?
Ooh,
that's a good one. Obviously it's going to be, some of it is going to be Azure spend, and some of it's going to be licensing. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be, what are you really leveraging? What did you overspend for? And what do you guys really need? How about that?
Yeah, and something we mentioned earlier as well was the looking at, so you're right, like low hanging fruit, like resizing VMs, but going a layer deeper than that as well. Do I even need that VM, right? If you do a lift and shift, more often than not, when we look at customer environments where a year, 2 years ago, whatever, they just forklifted everything into the cloud as is, bringing SQL servers, application servers. The majority of these things can be refactored either to cloud native, like like actual serverless deployments, or in other cases they could be popular available like products, like applications that are now available on the marketplace as containerized apps. So either like Docker containers, or like just distributed deployments. So there's a super layered question for sure, as Afif said, but so a super layered answer, but it's like definitely on the Azure side specifically, it's going to be looking at like what you have there, and just seeing like, is it needed? Can it be refactored? And more often than not, I would say it can.
Yeah.
Can it be consolidated? Do you need everything to be replicated? Do you need everything that goes to consolidation? Are you using all of Microsoft's efficiency tips, not just Azure Advisor, but other
100%
that they have? Are you looking at the actual utilization of those servers and of those resources? Is it relevant to have them available at all times? Or, is your production environment very seasonal, or, depending on the type of the time of the day, is there something that we can, consolidate during one part of the day and, have, max availability during other parts of the day.
Exactly.
So you may be under provisioning various loads and various peaks of your production day, whether it be ETL operations overnight, whether it be production traffic, when your users are there. So it really depends on your environment and what you're using Azure for.
Yeah.
But absolutely, there are ways to consolidate and
Yeah.
make more efficient your Azure spend and M365.
M365. Well, just like the question was just cloud in general, right? And that's where I brought it up earlier. Like, I feel like a lot of organizations just have SaaS overload. You'll have things that do the same things that are already that you're already paying with your Microsoft licensing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
It's true.
book that consultation with us. Let's see what we can do for you.
Awesome. Jumping back to a question from the UK from Bobby. I love Bobby here. He's one of our customers. Okay, for Microsoft Defender P2, what is the minimum license needed on a shared mailbox?
On a Defender Plan 2. So I mean, so the Defender Plan 2, that's going to be like a per user type instance, right? But once you have that license available to you, that's where you then can leverage all of the Exchange Online Protection or Defender for Office, right? So that's going to be your anti-spam, anti-phish, where you can go ahead and configure all of those policies that will get you kind of jump started in that email security space.
Since it's a shared mailbox, you're going to want to license the people who access that shared mailbox.
That's right.
So the protection is only as good as what it's applied to. So it's going to need to be applied to those users that are accessing that shared mailbox too. Generally speaking, that's the way Microsoft licenses some of these services that cover a broad range of users. You have to license the users that benefit from the license, similar to an Entra ID Plan 1 or Entra ID Plan 2.
Right.
It isn't enough just to give a single mailbox a license. A shared mailbox having a license like that is maybe not what we would recommend anyway, but the users themselves. So that not only is that access to the shared mailbox protected, but also everything else those users do.
No, exactly. Even at that point, I just want to emphasize that if you even do have those licensing, right, you still have to configure them.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to make sure that it all aligns with industry standards and best practices.
As nice as it would be, they're not.
It's not plug and play.
Awesome. Another really hot topic that I know I'm hearing a lot about is what is Azure Service Fabric used for? And I know we have a pre-made graphic ready, so I'm going to pull that up while you guys answer that. Sorry, it's taking a little.
Sorry, Bob Kanisha is at a glacial pace.
Here we go.
So, Service Fabric. This is well, I mean, the graphic pretty much does all the hard work there. So, like, Azure is really just the backbone of this, doing all the orchestration, right? Like moving pieces to and fro, up and down. With microservices and containers, so we use a lot of them here. But you know what? I totally tangented off. Could you state the question again for me, please, Kanisha?
I believe it's at the top. What is Azure Service Fabric used for?
Yeah.
Jeez, I got so far down the rabbit hole there. So, or not that far. Service Fabric is really the fabric because Microsoft they're pretty smart with the names. Tying all of these things together, right? Your containers, your microservices across your like microservices. So I don't want to get too deep, but I want to make sure like we explain all the things here. So like containers, kind of touched on them a little bit earlier, where like Docker is really like the player here for containerization. So you have a really like much smaller like image of usually Linux, not really a Windows thing, and that gets built, and then it has the very minimal things needed to be installed to run an application. So you could have a container that you could start that would run, let's say, an FTP server. I think on our last webinar, Andrew Hill demonstrated Crush FTP as an example. So rather than having like that set running in a VM and go through all the rigmarole, setting it up with Windows and networking and all that jazz, it could be in a container and it's managed by code, and it just runs. And then the microservices part of that is things like Kubernetes. So like if you could have like a trying to think of like a good example, but like if you had a web app that was super high traffic and you needed to be able to scale out as traffic demands increase, that's what microservices are. And it's all kind of like related where you're not having to have these gigantic monolithic deployments, much smaller, like piecemeal, like infrastructure as code, things get built and deployed as you go, as needed. They can scale out and up and all of that good stuff. And so Service Fabric is literally the fabric that is woven between all of these things to let them work together. So from your dev machine, like on the graphic there, you know, you're making changes in your GitHub or Azure DevOps repo, making a change to your pipeline, which has just text, it's just code that defines what is being put into the container, as an example. And that gets saved, everything's all working together, it's pushed to your repo, the service fabric, the orchestration kicks in, DevOps, let's say Azure DevOps, the pipeline pushes that now to your object in Azure, the container gets updated, it's available, and then everything as well, like if you have pre-baked like monitoring, if you're doing your stuff with like using like Azure Sentinel as a SIM, if you're using you know, if you have like whatever graph or monitoring tools you have, like Grafana with Prometheus or your Elk Stack, however you want to do it, all of these things could just when you deploy things either through extensions or additional layers of like infrastructure as code deployments can layer on these things with the graphs and the reporting without you having to reinvent the wheel and reinstall things every time you make a new deployment. And that keeps all of this together, keeps an eye on like your life cycle in terms of like making sure things are regularly maintained, and you get to also as well follow something from cradle to grave and then deploy a new thing. So, and then also as well, little graph there, on-prem data centers and other clouds. If you are a multi-cloud org and you have needs or specific requirements to go multi-cloud, you can do that as well, and that can be driven out of Azure. So if you just need to have that sort of orchestration elsewhere, that can still be driven out of Azure. See that actually fairly commonly when folks are like transitioning to Azure, but they still have a pretty large footprint and presence elsewhere, and they have to sort of, you know, gradually stage their way, but they want to get stuff in Azure because it's generally more cost effective and more like aligned with maybe like the stack that they're used to, or like with the Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you still got to like attend to and maintain that existing stuff, and so that's really good use case there. So that was a long bunch of I apologize.
No, that was great.
That's beautiful. All right, I like this next question because we know how reactive the security industry can be and never ending. How can IT pros achieve quick wins when implementing security?
This is a great one, honestly, because I know a lot of IT admins have very little time, are up against high expectations from leadership, and want to quickly secure their environment. So we recommend looking at your secure scores, looking at your Azure Advisor, taking some of those recommendations, and they will give you individual recommendations that can be easily deployed, steps to do them, the licensing that you might need, and how that can affect your secure score. So some organizations have requirements to keep their secure score above, let's say 80%, 75%, something like that.
Yeah.
Although that may be a little bit of an obtuse judgment of how secure an environment truly is, it is a metric that is looked at very often in our industry, especially
100%.
when we deal with Microsoft 365. So we recommend going into Defender, going into Purview, taking some of those recommendations, implementing the ones that can be implemented relatively easily, and you can see that score gradually rise up. Now, there'll be some user training involved in that as well. Maybe some MFA methods need to be rolled out. Maybe some DLP policies need to be rolled out, some data loss prevention. Maybe there's a set of other tools that needs to be integrated and needs to be added in. So you might not have a fully licensed environment for your compliance purposes. Again, depending industry specific, but we would recommend looking at your Azure Advisor if you are in Azure, looking at your secure score, if you are looking to bump that up or looking for kind of quick recommendations. And finally, just referring to Microsoft best practices, because they will give you the roadmap to a more secure environment. You just have to follow some of the steps that they provide for you.
No, exactly. And literally, well said, Will. And pretty much within the Defender Admin Center, within the Purview Admin Center, Microsoft literally gamified, I think, what a secure score is, right? And the awesome thing about Trusted Tech Team is with our Microsoft certified experts, right, our architects and engineers, this is like a piece of cake for us. I mean, more common enough. Some of our engagements that are security focused, we've taken secure scores all the way from 30% to 85%,
Yeah.
which is pretty crazy. But I mean, if you look at the what all the policies entails, it's pretty much listed out there, right? But if you need advice, if you need a partner, we're here for you.
Yeah, I love
it. Cool. This next one is a really good question, and I'd actually love to get multiple points of views on this one. Okay, so Alex asks, beginning September 30th, 2025, authentication methods can't be managed in these legacy MFA and SSPR policies. We need to move to the authentication methods policy for Microsoft Entra ID. Is there any risk with doing the migration earlier? I don't want to disrupt logins or services, but I'd like to migrate to the new methods and move off of the legacy methods. I assume it just gives people access to the new ones and it won't affect them once we migrate, but I wanted to be sure. Thank you. That's a long one.
You know, I'll answer that one. You know, if you're on legacy methods, it's time to move on. It's time to move on. I mean, I think Microsoft has been emphasizing that, you know, slowly. I think they removed it at one point and people asked for, you know, security defaults to come back again, and they kind of revamped security defaults. They talked about that in Ignite. But no, I mean, if you're not leveraging conditional access for your MFA, you got to start doing that right now, man. Yes, the prerequisite is having that Entra P1 license.
For all users.
For all users. Right? But it does unlock you to a whole new level of MFA, session control. Within conditional access, you could geofence, right? If someone's outside of the US, it immediately blocks it. It's like, at this point, like it's kind of like a very easy, no-brainer sell. Even when it comes to, you know, speaking to your C-suite of the organization, that's like number one, identity security, preventing cyber attacks.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most common tickets, unfortunately, that we get on the support side, which is a compromised user, maybe a login from an unreputable country, has no business operations going on. There should be no reason for that login.
Yeah.
You know, usually no MFA set up, but sometimes there could be like legacy MFA methods that were set up. Maybe a user just accepts a prompt that they didn't expect. And this is how breaches happen. And then we have to go through and, you know, eliminate the compromise, remediate, see what was done, run an audit. I mean, look at the mailbox, look at what permissions were changed. It's a lot of steps after that point of entry. But if you can prevent that, you want to. And all that doing it early is going to do is get your users familiar with those new methods, get them familiar to the login process. And that way you're not forced into it on that date. What was it, September 30th, 2025?
Yeah.
That's the last time you want to roll it out, because that's when you're going to have, you know, all organizations trying to get support with this. You're going to have a lot of other people who waited and who didn't plan early, trying to roll this out to their users at the same time. So I would say prepare now, roll it out to your users now. See where some of the consternation is, where some of the frustration is. Work through, while you have still 9 months or so, work through that with your users, and you can plan for that cutover date, and you won't even realize that cutover date happens when you have that environment.
And then just to make sure as well, like we're outwardly, like there's no risk for you doing that migration out there.
No risk at all.
And like this stuff has been GA for 2 years now, maybe. It's been around for a minute, very well documented, very well traveled, no risk, but of course we're always here as well to just, you know, like give you a, you know, just bounce something off of us. We'll run through it, make sure all the boxes are ticked, all of the points are covered, just to make sure, you know, you got that peace of mind. But this is the good stuff. Like getting ahead of these things is a very smart move.
And one thing I want to add to it, right? You mentioned authentication methods. There's more than just SMS. There's more than just a phone call. Yes, you have your FIDO keys, but what's actually the best practice right now, the industry standard, is to do the what's that called?
Sovereign authenticator or YubiKey?
Yes, the authenticator, but then it's not just using your fingerprint, but no password. That's what it's called.
Oh, passwordless.
Passwordless, yes. Password.
I got you.
Passwordless MFA, right? That's going to be your most secure option, because why? The numbers rotate for the users to authenticate their identity.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use SMS unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Don't use SMS.
Do not use SMS, especially not in a shared situation.
Yeah.
You never want the iPad on the wall. Someone comes up to it, what's the code? We can't get into this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you have any further questions, maybe you want advice on to roll out your MFA, hit us up.
Oh, you're muted, Kanisha.
Oh no, thank you. Okay, cool. So a question from HA. What would you recommend as an MDR that would work very well with Defender and O365 security? I know that might probably depend on some of the features that they're looking for, but do you guys have any recommendations?
It's a broad question. Could you state it for us one more time, just
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
know and we answer every part of it?
Yeah. What would you recommend as an MDR that would work very well with Defender and O365 security?
Yeah, I mean, like that's going to be everything that we just mentioned within the whole Defender suite, right? So talking about more specifically on the device level, that's going to be Defender for Endpoint, right? So, and actually you configure everything for Defender for Endpoint within Intune, right? So those are going to be your ASR rules, your EDR rules, endpoint detection and response. That all gets configured within Intune. But that would be the best solution, honestly, making sure that you're leveraging Defender for Endpoint and all the other Defender products. But that's going to be at the device level, the very foundational piece.
Yeah, that said though, I think if you did want to go like third party, there are some like, because like Microsoft is pretty friendly with a lot, like, you know, the whole industry. Like I think there are some MDR products that play a little more nicely with Defender, I think, but you know, maybe just keep it all consolidated.
Consolidate.
That's Afif's favorite word. Consolidate. Consolidate. Yeah, it's just another console, another set of logs, another set of alerts to deal with, right? It's like, you know, there's really something to be said about like having that simplified stack.
That holistic approach, you know,
Definitely.
one approach. And if you do have to reach out to support, whether it be with us or with Microsoft, we have that visibility into those.
That's a very important
and
point.
the other vendors are not going to be able to see what's happening in Microsoft, and Microsoft's not going to be able to see what's happening in those other vendors' solutions. So you can keep it all separate, but it does make a lot more work for you when you're hunting, when you're checking in, and when you're trying to get support for an issue.
When it's the most critical, time-sensitive thing, it's going to be very difficult and hard to find.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Having us as your solutions partner, that's the solution right there.
Awesome. Okay, we've got 7 minutes left and we still have a lot of questions. So a little bit of a speed round here. Alex asks, have you run into customers that can't use biometrics because of legal restrictions? Curious how you have achieved passwordless without biometrics.
Biometrics, I mean, foundationally is going to be Windows Hello for Business, right? That's kind of like the foundational piece. Yes, there's different devices where you can do fingerprint and whatever, but foundationally, that's already provided on most devices is going to be the Windows Hello for Business, the face scan, facial recognition, right? I believe that's the technology.
So that comes out. So when there's legal or other compliance requirements or preventions. So you can do Windows Hello with Business with a little bit of creative deployments. I believe you can get by with like initially it would be password and then PIN for setting up Windows Hello.
Yeah.
And then that satisfies the requirements. And then with your company deployed cell phones, I would imagine you can have those configured with Intune to be only PIN. No biometrics there. So then that way you avoid the face login, you avoid having, fingerprint being recorded. And then so that PIN becomes sort of like the biometric part where normally you'd have a face or a fingerprint. And then from there, everything should just work the same way with passwordless. So, but all around policy and governance and making sure things are configured correctly. And then that way you're able to, make sure you're not falling afoul of like if you have any particular regulatory requirements around that.
Microsoft also has industry-specific guidelines that you navigate those situations.
If you're medical or whatever the industry may be.
And all the different standards, so maybe it's HIPAA or maybe it's another industry-specific level of regulation. Microsoft has best practices for those specific regulations. So if your industry does have to adhere to one of those, Microsoft usually has these pre-built out recommendations for best practices for a tenant that does have to adhere to that level of compliance.
Yeah. Big fan.
Cool. Question from Germany. Can we discuss TTT assistance with migration on-prem file server to SP? Believe it will help us with day-to-day routine.
That sounds like a professional services project to
Yeah,
me.
and I think it will help with the daily routine, right? Yeah, if you've got users that are distributed with the like lots of work from home or
Yeah.
you know like lots more remote working, especially in Europe, you know, like where you know folks can be sort of like scattered around the Schengen zone, being able to work from different countries all over the place.
Mhm.
SharePoint suddenly becomes a lot more appealing than having a file server on-prem that you have to VPN to, and
Yeah,
manage
that's
all of that. So
painful. Why
yeah.
do that? With M365, it's identity based,
Yeah.
right? So just from your identity alone, we can then, put you into the dynamic groups depending on departments,
Yep.
your job role, whatever the function may be, and get you the appropriate data within the organization. I think that already ultimately increases your efficiency.
Yeah, so definitely a very easy, very straightforward process. Obviously, depending on requirements, but
Mhm.
I think yeah, we could definitely help, and I think we can reach out.
Yeah, and I'll say this too to kind of like sell you as a project a little bit, right? Because not every solution is going to be the same. We can even then create different SharePoint sites for you, right?
Yep.
Different hub and spoke models, whatever the case may be. If you want a landing page, something general for your users to then further navigate to, that's what we could do.
That's the key thing we see about SharePoint. We see a lot of messy SharePoint environments. So a lot of people will just get their data into SharePoint and just dump it there. They will have no organization, no structure, permissions all over the place. Which is why people get a little bit scared with tools like Copilot. They think that users can be able to retrieve documents that they shouldn't have access to. Well, that's not a Copilot issue. That's a permissions issue. That was already
data governance
without Copilot. But you can find that integration with all the rest of the O365 suite with SharePoint will be much more beneficial than a file server. So please reach out to this guy's team. They can take care of you.
Make it happen. And just a very quick recap on all of that. It's the same notion across all these different things. Forklifting, just dumping something from one place to another, generally doesn't work out that great, right? There's value in spending time to make sure it's done the right way. And if it wasn't, well, now's the time to make it get done the right way. And it'll make your life easier, more accessible.
Definitely.
Amazing. Okay. Last question, and I don't think we'll get to fully give this question justice, but somebody asked earlier, how do you monitor and manage Azure resources using Azure Monitor? You have a minute, Andy, go.
Speedrun. Azure Monitor. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of pre-baked templates that Microsoft has because they're really helpful and they've seen a lot of stuff. So first pass, Azure Monitor has certain like all the meters that you're interested in. So like depending, in this context based as well. So if it's a SQL Server, it has like query times. It has like process costing, scoring. So like what's going on there. It has like index fragmentations, all that sorts of cool stuff. If you have a regular VM, it has your CPU, your RAM, your disk, everything. So Azure Monitor can be looked at in a vacuum in one VM, but the real value comes from using dashboards in Azure, and then you can attach your Azure Monitor widgets that you've built elsewhere, and over time, or with some pre-built ones that are available, you can get everything hooked up and have a nice little dashboard monitor view, and it can be on a subscription level, it could be on a resource group level, you could have it based on tag to monitor your dev, prod, QA environments. It could be per project. It could be so you are right, Kanisha. That was not enough time, but that's good.
That was awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. I know for that question that we have that awesome webinar that we did last month on Azure, and we also have multiple resources. Like you can get a consultation on M365 or Azure, and you can click that link right there. We have in-depth expertise on all of it, as you can see from our lovely gents over here. So yeah, I want to wrap it up. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm so sorry that we didn't get to all of your questions, but we will be following up after, and you guys can always reach out to us. We will be doing more webinars in the future, so look out for that. It'll be on our website, and we'll be sending emails out. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. We'll send that email out with slides and recordings in a couple days. And a massive thank you to our panelists, Afif, Will, Andy. You guys are amazing. You guys really showcase your expertise. So thank you very much. If you guys like our content or our webinars, feel free to follow us on social media. Thank you. We'll have our next webinar in January. Have a nice day, everybody, and take care. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
All right.
Bye.